I made some videos about anti-gravity racing games, someone responded to 3 of them, and here's my response to that response.
Anti-gravity racers are some of my favorite racing games of all time.
You've literally only played 2 of them!
Okay, so the criticism here is that he thinks the wider tracks in GX overall make the turning and avoiding enemies way easier in the game.
Correct.
Which I would kind of slightly disagree with because, there are over 30 racers on each track.
So are there in F-Zero X.
And even once you become somewhat decent at dodging CPUs in the game,
Just like X.
you still have to deal with all the crazy twists and turns that most of these tracks have. I'll give an example of the game. Here in Mute City Serial Gaps, you have the section at the beginning where there are mines on the racetrack. To avoid them, the player must dodge and weave through them, while also dodging enemy cars as they can bump you into these.
Like
These tracks
X!
feature city sections with these slippery patches, which also narrow the track even further, and even a shortcut that is in this top path. That, if taken correctly, is actually faster than the normal path, but has a higher risk as you
Yes,
go
yes,
up,
very
such as the
unique.
path, or just straight up die. My point being that yes, these tracks are overall wider,
Yes, that was the point. They're wider in general.
but if you're not going literally 1 mile per hour, you will have to contest multiple of the CPUs, especially on the hardest difficulty, where they actively try to spin attack you and knock you off course.
I don't know what he's trying to get at. If you're saying the game makes you dodge opponents because there's so many of them, well guess what? F-Zero X has the same 30 racers on narrow tracks with weaker strafing. That game emphasized avoiding opponents way better than GX did. Commenters noticed this too, and in response, he contradicts himself by saying that X was actually really cramped and unfair, the CPUs would ping pong you. Like, which one is it then? Do you like having to dodge or engage opponents? X is a better game in that case. Or do you like the wider tracks because they make the races cleaner than X? Well, that's exactly one of the points I made. Why make this a video section in the first place?
I guess his overall point about this game being easier to control than X is true, but the game scales in difficulty the higher you try to place in these races.
I mean, rubber banding, X had a 2, though not as strong.
If you try to go for first place on the maximum difficulty, then these tracks are extremely difficult, even with all the advanced tech you can know.
No, you can comfortably beat F-Zero GX on the hardest difficulty without any advanced tech. You can find plenty of glitchless playthroughs online. And I'm assuming you mean the races become harder, because changing the difficulty doesn't change the tracks, unless you count respawning.
All this to say, while I do agree that the wider tracks does make the car handling much more smoother and easier to approach, the racetracks at GX get far, far less forgiving the further into the game you get.
So like X.
So I feel like this complaint is a little bit of a personal preference. Yes, the quick turn exploit allows you to take every turn in the game almost effortlessly,
Didn't know people considered quick turn an exploit when you can play it off by accident, but whatever.
but I wouldn't say the main challenge with F-Zero GX is getting to a top speed and maintaining it,
Maintaining top speed has been a crucial aspect since the very first F-Zero, but whatever.
but rather it's about finding opportunities in the course to better exploit these abilities to get an edge on your opponent.
I don't get this one. Are you saying unintended shortcuts are the highlights? This mindset will make more sense once we discover this guy's main genre, which, big surprise, isn't racing.
Just look at any competitive race between two GX players. They're constantly going at max speed, but the better player is finding different shortcuts and exploits to gain an incremental advantage in order to take the race.
When you say competitive, you better at least show a race where one opponent isn't half a lap ahead of the other.
Again, it's different from F-Zero X, but I wouldn't necessarily call it easier, as you still have to learn these mechanics, and a beginner player is not going to come anywhere close to being good with this, even after they learn the tech.
Again, you don't need to learn any exploits to beat any F-Zero game. That's a common misconception coming from GX's overhyped difficulty. Most of these tech aren't intended and are way too overpowered and game-breaking. Even if you can't optimize them, they'll still give you huge advantage. Also, F-Zero X had a lot of bullshit as well, so this isn't a GX exclusive thing. But now the game isn't designed around them. A track that isn't a glorified airstrip, the strafing is now too strong for it.
I don't know what the point of this main criticism is targeted at. As I said before, the game has wider tracks mostly because of the 30 racers on a track at a time, but also this example he shows on screen with Phantom Road showcases the exact reason why such narrow tracks are kind of bad for this type of game. The camera and strafing mechanisms in the game don't keep up well with such slimly designed tracks.
Yes, that's what I said. You're just repeating me at this point, but somehow want us to reach a different conclusion. I'll expand after the next clip. Also, analog strafing. Don't cut that line out.
Also, the comparison to Mario Kart is pretty weird, as I know Seppi isn't a fan of kart racing games, as they dumb down the mechanics of racing a lot. But the reason these tracks are so much wider in Mario Kart and other kart racing games is because players are constantly spamming items that can traverse the entire area. Now imagine how broken and even more chaotic a green shell would be on tracks like these.
Well, you can't make the audio excuse for F-Zero, but he's somewhat getting it. Easier driving and cleaner races are the primary reasons for widening the tracks. Unfortunately, I have to mention that this isn't me making things up. It's a logical conclusion shared by AI, humans, and Reddit users alike. This isn't a kart racer or AGR thing, it's a racing game thing. Why do you think Horizon and the crew get me on so much for roads being so incredibly wide? X tracks were already too wide and speed focused. You never even brake in that game, so GX had no business widening them even further and increasing the grip to power ratio in addition. Giga grip vehicles on giga wide tracks? Yeah, that would perfectly describe Mario Kart as well. And don't talk to me about balance in a game with noob tubes and item rubber banding. To wrap things up, your tracks wide because 30 racers argument doesn't make much sense. We're talking about a game that puts you against that many opponents in the first place, gives you 2 combat moves, a kill count, and even a bit of health for taking others out. This isn't a game that wants you to race clean or by yourself, or else they would have gone with a typical 8-racer grid. It's easier on the hardware too. So it's safe to assume that making the driving easier was the main reason for widening the tracks, and the races became cleaner as a side effect. The other option would have been to make the ships grippier or slower. Well, they're incredibly grippy and responsive already, and slowing them down was obviously not an option in a game known for being fast.
Now, I will admit this is an overall design flaw with GX's racing mechanics, as it is quite difficult to keep a straight line if you're going at top speed in a slow car, but that is the difficulty I was talking about before.
It's no secret that the faster you're going, the bigger of an impact your steering inputs will have. I wonder which game emphasizes and was made on a console that had a controller fit for the job.
Arab drifting is a very niche mechanic that only works for like time attack trials and on only like 6 tracks in the game.
What is snaking? The thing I like to call Arab drifting? If you use max acceleration settings in GX, alternating between left and right strafing will actually increase your speed. That's why snaking gameplay looks like this. But wait a minute, did you say niche mechanic?
Arab drifting is a very niche mechanic that only works for like time attack trials and on only like 6 tracks in the game. If you try to do this in a real race on every track, you're almost guaranteed to lose because there are just too many racers on the track. It does look very cool though, but no, sadly GX is not a snaking game.
Where did you pull that from? This isn't important, but it's by far the most egregious error in the entire video. GX's snaking is so busted, it makes most other exploits look like Mario Kart. Don't believe me? Look at the leaderboards. Snaking runs have their own category. The time difference to non-snaking runs isn't even comparable. It's like a different game. And it doesn't matter if it's a race, you'll be out in front in no time. And it looks fucking stupid. It quickly causes wrist pain, hence the separate category.
I don't know what the whole point of this tangent is because he did admit that most players find it very difficult, but in his opinion it's pretty easy compared to F-Zero X.
GX's difficulty is way overrated. I already went over why and plan to expand upon it later, but this is a battle I'll never win.
Again, it depends on what he's referencing here. If he's talking about the main controls, then I would say F-Zero X is a lot more difficult to control, which I'll definitely agree with, but if we're talking about the actual mission difficulty, then yeah, F-Zero GX definitely takes the cake.
Even GX's missions aren't that hard. I already covered mission 2, but now let's cover mission 7, one of the most, if not the most infamous mission in GX. I have another video where I beat this level on the hardest difficulty while giving the AI a 5-second head start without using any tech bullshit and with some other small handicaps. This is not a display of driving skills. The driving is above average at best, and no matter how skilled you are, every vehicle has its limit. It is instead a display of patience, because while you spend most of the time fighting for positions in this mission, the AI is scripted to slow down on the final straight, allowing you to take the win at the last seconds. I literally beat this mission on my first attempt on hard and very hard difficulty. Normal had 2 resets because I was learning the track, and this was all live too. It's not just me, watch other people beating this mission and you see the exact same pattern at the end. I suspect that players giving up too early is the main factor behind this mission's infamy, because all they had to do was stay close to the front pack until the final straight. So no, F-Zero GX's hardest mission doesn't deserve its title, you're just too impatient. Also, what did you expect when you picked the hardest difficulty? I fail to believe that most people play their games with difficulty set to max. If we judge games based on their max difficulty, GX would fare even easier. In HRs alone, I came across 3 games where no one had recorded a finished run. One of them I had to cheese with a frame rate toggle, and the other to remain undefeated on their hardest difficulty to this date.
This part of the video I think he just straight up gets wrong. He says that the $1.5 million mark is contradictory, but every online article I researched it says it made at least 1 million copies sold. It apparently was even given the Player's Choice seal from Nintendo, which is only designated to video games that have sold over 1 million copies, so it has to be over 1 million at least. This 700k or less copies sold thing is something I've never heard of before. I couldn't find it anywhere in the sources he left in the description, so maybe it's some secret interview we missed.
He hasn't done his due diligence for this part, like most of the video, but he does have a point at the end. I linked a wiki for the sales estimate, and someone edited it to replace his 700k estimate with a 1.5 mil figure. So, how many copies did F-Zero GX sell? In an interview, the producer of the game said GX sold 1.5 million copies worldwide. So that must be it, right? It's been 15 years after all. Maybe he pulled that out of his ass or simply misremembered it? Well, that's exactly what people debated over online, because prior to this interview, there was no indication of GX selling even 1 million copies. He shows a Reddit post, seriously, that says GX must have sold over 1 million because it was on Player's Choice, but actually, the threshold for the Player's Choice Award was lowered to 450k in 2003 for GameCube, with another source indicating that it might have even been 250k. The most reliable figure is from a publication that, even to this day, tracks weekly physical sales for Japan only, and that one's at just over 100k. All this with worldwide estimates at mid to high 6 figures, far from the 1.5 mil mark. Which one you want to believe is up to you, but don't claim to have done research when you've ever even heard of the estimations. This has been discussed in Nintendo circles already, even in the Reddit thread you showed, and an estimation still shows up in Google's first page. One reason my videos take a long time to make is because I'm lazy, but also because I double check stuff like this, so I don't end up saying things as absurd as
Air drifting is a very niche mechanic that
I don't understand how he can claim to be an AGR fan, dedicate 1/3 of the video to GX, and have no clue about the thing that would have been near the top of his iceberg. Yeah, and I'm the one who's confidently wrong and rage baiting for engagement apparently. What engagement are you guys talking about? My AGR videos performed so bad that even a lazy, poorly researched response to them got more views than the originals. They're the most ratioed videos on my channel. I'm not trying to present my opinion as fact, those are two different things, and you clearly like neither. You rather hear lies because they sound better than the truth. You mistake criticism for rage bait and mistake nostalgia bait for fact. You don't want to believe that the childhood games you have a hard nostalgia boner for are largely forgotten. Kart races are at least popular among families, but for AGRs, there's only one reality. Now let's move over to the next section of the response, which covers XF Extreme Formula. But the sense of speed alone is never going to carry an entire game.
Oh? It's not, you say? Then tell me, what is this game's whole deal all about?
I really don't know, you tell me. Looks like some fast-paced platformer to me. Actually, we know this guy probably isn't an HR fan, since he can't get basic facts right. He does seem to like XF though, and XF's developer is mainly known for fast platformers. If you look at it that way, XF isn't that different. The vehicles look like ships, but they handle more like characters. They have no weight, momentum, or inertia, they fully brake in a near instant and never lose traction outside of water sections. They lack principles that define vehicle physics. Not just cars, and this is unrelated to how realistically they're perceived. They rely on tricks to make up for gameplay. I mentioned this for Aero GPX and Star Racer in the same video, but of course XF fans couldn't help but to comment before finishing it. And those two games are far more interesting to cover, because XF only has one barely notable trick, and of course it's a type of drift boosting. That's also one reason I didn't go into XF as deeply, because the same points still applied. The other reason is that it's an early access game. XF fanboys came at me hard for playing an older build of the game, and sometimes I misrepresented it because the new content wasn't there.
Although I will say it's weird that he only dedicates about 30 seconds to this game where it has so much more to offer, especially since he's most likely playing the update that has the amazing engrossing story mode added to it.
Have you really watched my AGR videos?
While I did watch all of the videos in this playlist,
You really want me to talk about story in a racing game? Yeah, story will totally make me a believer when the core gameplay isn't what I'm looking for. And I'm not gonna beta test every build, especially when every update invalidates your save file. If the developer doesn't like people playing a work in progress build of his game, maybe he shouldn't have released it to public and sold it for money. The developer has actually been reasonable, unlike the fanbase. I don't see anyone mention the fanboys problem early access games like this have, ACFO being the most obvious. The way these fans defend the game and actively try to shut down negative criticism is, I'd say, actually hurting the game. Regardless, I will revisit XS once it's a finished product. Until then, it can burn in early access hell. Also, I should have clarified that when I say most of the game takes place in a straight, I don't literally mean a perfectly straight line. Corners that are so shallow you can comfortably take them flat up also count. And as if for XF, hopefully I won't have to deal with its fans after this, wishful thinking. Thought Aero fans were too big of a simp, but XF fans have proven me wrong. Many comments criticize me for valuing my own opinion over others. Well, when it comes to racing games, I think a dedicated player should have more say than a platformer player who, as we saw, gets basic stuff wrong about racing games, or someone who puts Garfield Kart in his top 3. But maybe I just need to major in game design first. I'm certainly not an expert, but I'm also far from clueless like this video and half of its comments. Yeah, you don't see me trying to turn racing games into platformers because I like the latter more. Now let's get the final section over with.
This could definitely just be a personal opinion of mine.
but I find the idea that anti-gravity racers were born out of the necessity for console limitations is a quite ingenious and creative feat of design. After all, some of the best video games of all time are that way because they had to compromise on a core mechanic or get around a problem with a creative solution. It's why you have the iconic fog effect in Silent Hill that defines that series. Limitations breed creativity.
Not always though, sometimes limitations just make things worse. Old runner style racing games as an example. I'll have a section related to this in an upcoming video.
Okay, this is by far the weirdest complaint that Seppi has for these games. His whole obsession with floor huggers and how that's a bad thing. He also seems to think that this is an objective opinion that all gamers hold, which he thinks is giving the genre a bad reputation. Which is funny because the most often type of criticism I see for these games are usually the bad optimization or poor CPU AI. They rarely ever talk about the fact that the car's glued to the ground.
Yes, Steam reviews. It's either optimization, bugs, difficulty, or corpo pissing people off. They're not to be trusted when Barrow is sitting at very positive. The majority are either incredible surface level or trolling. Also, taking out the whole physical dimension out of a racing game? Pretty big deal if you ask me. especially when that dimension is responsible for gravity in a genre known as anti-gravity.
Okay, this seems the most rage bait out of all of the videos so far. Showing Kirby Air Ride and Mario Kart Double Dash as examples of bad racing games is quite insane to me. But I'll be generous and assume you just meant that they're bad as specifically racing games and not just video games in general. I'd still definitely disagree, but we already know that this guy doesn't like kart racers that much.
Yeah, I shit on Mario Kart a lot, alright? But if we ignore that, Nintendo platforms simply don't hold a candle to Sony and Microsoft when it comes to racing games, especially pre-Switch. Compare whatever aspect you want. Popularity, sales, exclusive, number of big releases, Nintendo doesn't come close. Even multi-platform games sometimes skip Nintendo. There's no Midnight Club, Test Drive, or Flat Out for the GameCube. I never said the games themselves are bad, but the overall lineup certainly is.
Okay, seriously dude, AI art?
Better than a Reddit post?
I agree with most of what he's saying here, but dude really has to explain why he hates kart racers so much, at least specifically Mario Kart, because if you even remotely get into the competitive aspect...
Competitive Mario Kart, yeah, we can skip the rest of that. Not saying it doesn't require any skill, just too little of it, when compared to basically every non-kart racer. What are you expecting from a game made for children that has item rubber banding burned into its core? And I know what some of you are going to say, but no. People make competitions out of the dumbest things, and Mario Kart isn't an exception. AGRs don't appeal to anyone and are inferior to the alternatives.
Okay, I definitely don't agree with those last 2 points, but I feel like he left off one really big factor as to why AG racers haven't been a surviving genre up until this point. They have yet to feature a big release like all of the other genres of racing games.
That gives us more questions than answers. Why aren't companies considering a major release, I wonder? Narrow appeal is certainly one of them. Well, we don't know much yet, but a new pod racer is in the works. If this doesn't succeed, no AGR ever will, because it got everything behind it. A big IP, great predecessor with untapped potential, and key figures from Need for Speed and... Never mind, it's doomed. Well, at least he's not trying to pass off Kirby as a full-on AGR, like some comments do solely to invalidate me. Yeah, let's get to those. I don't have anything else substantial enough to say about the response. The rest of the video is a roast session. You've been warned. Writing of F-Zero as cheap came from inability to animate wheels, like writing of Majora Max for reusing assets. Reusing assets and hardware limitations are two different things. Top comments, by the way. PCC vibrators are the entry point. You don't have to dumb down the whole game for everyone. Horizon exists. As much as I despise Microsoft, can't deny its popularity. It's deep enough for advanced players to appreciate its complexity, while offering the right aids for casual players that simplify it enough to become approachable. Here's some dev making fun of me for basically not having a major in game design. Of course he pulls out the realism card, but no, AGR stopped improving in basically 98. Don't need to compare it to know the physics haven't improved at all, or other aspects. You watch 50 episodes of children's anime only to hate it! World Race and Accelerate Races are also made for children. They're still deep enough for adults to enjoy it. Still the best story in racing, unlike the F-Zero Weep Slop. But not since Sebit's video. Opinion rejected immediately. Like, Ridge Racer wasn't a single exception, it was an example. And there's a difference between 1 million and 10 million. It's about 10 million. It's a one line about arena shooters, and this guy criticized me for not listing every other factor. It's an AGR video. Adron not being a real racing game? Yes, we'll get to that. I already have to an extent in AGR Part 9. It's using barrow as a slur. That's what I use to describe games that basically boil down to holding accelerate. Got better suggestions? Got blinded by his level of skill. Again, overhyped difficulty. You're way overestimating me. Limitation is the reason kart racers even exist. Don't get this, but Mario Kart had an extra processor in the cartridge, so they didn't exactly work around the limitation. Big ones didn't get online play until much later. That is a valid point, especially since their speed makes networking harder. Didn't like them because of his general attitude. Damn right, I want Mario Kart to find my scripts. Sounds like he wants gaming to be realistic. Nope, next. People think F-Zero GX sucks. Have they played it? Never said that, but some Nintendo fanboys haven't played any non-Nintendo racing games, that's for sure. Doesn't seem to like racing games in general. Yeah, I hate everything. But show that Arena Shooters. It's an AGR video. And you can't deny that Arena Shooters have become way too niche. Bad attitude again? The type of person that when they discover they don't like a thing, they convince others not to like it. Probably like AGRs more than most of you do. Player numbers say more than enough. As each entry dropped, along with the total views, he felt more bitter. The general structure was already written before the first part, so... Really only enjoys realistic racing games. No, I just clearly hate everything, and the realism classification of racing games is one of them. That's way too big of a rabbit hole to discuss here. Jet Moto 3 was a fucking classic. Comment hearts. Not even Jet Moto fans would say that about 3, unless it's the part that I've highlighted. Chapter 2 is by no means the hardest. That awards go to Chapter 7 with its infamous rubber banding. The rubber banding that literally hands you the win on a silver platter? Finish the race, goddammit. Why is he even doing this to himself? Good question.
Also got into Horizon GT, played both sim racers.
People who actually play Horizon GT don't call it a sim. Again, I don't care, and fuck the realism classification, but it's something to keep in mind if you want to sound like you know what you're talking about. Characters in racing games next.
Your video is great. This entire response sums up my thoughts.
Do your thoughts contain misinformation as well?
Sounds like a cynical whiner. Shit takes try to pass off as objective truths.
Did I have an indicator in the Director's Scars AGR video that says which line is a fact, opinion, or a joke? This roast session could certainly use it.
He didn't care at the end given his coverage of XF and GPX.
XF? Alright, it wasn't the latest version. But GPX? What did I miss? And yes, add early access to the hate list.
Who's gonna tell him Need for Speed was on GameCube?
No shit! Most Wanted was on like a billion platforms, in name at least. And yes, that was meant to show GameCube's racing exclusives. But of course you missed the entire point of that section.
They didn't have wheels, as if it's not a stylistic decision. They hugged the floor as maybe.
Are you serious? The verticality in floor huggers are pointless, but it has zero effect on gameplay. So yes, sim racers have more verticality, because it actually affects grip.
Sales figures are a marketing failure, not one of the game's quality.
Good thing I never said it was. It's a good indicator of popularity, and how likely it is for Corpus to greenlight a sequel. Again, completely missing the point.
Subscribing to both y'all so I get the most spice.
This guy's the only person coming out victorious out of all this. Another vibe out.
He's trying to come across as intellectually dishonest.
Quite the opposite. For some reason people don't believe what I say is what I think, and not rage bait. Proper banding AI. This one that's the least of GX's problems. Is beating the hardest mission. Handicapped. Good enough for you? Too lazy to re-upload the whole VOD.
Stop watching after XFX Team.
Of course you did!
Which one I found more appealing? Sci-fi hovercraft, obviously.
How many people do you think would pick Phasar over Lambo? You really thought you had a point there?
Dude, I needed you. Zeppy destroyed my faith in the genre, but you saved it.
Have I managed to re-destroy your fate now?
Nobody raises counterpoints in his comment sections.
I'd also like to see some good counterpoints, but my roast sessions are certainly not helping.
Arcade racers are different than simulation like Gran Turismo.
Clarify, they're not as different as people make them out to be. Shitting on Shitcage, and I'm not done yet. This since mentioned, still have to get back to that one.
I hate AGR so much that I played all of them.
Someone had to do it. And it certainly wasn't platformer players, they stopped that too.
It actually introduced me to XF and I've been loving it.
Uh-oh. But hey, will you guys leave me alone now? See?
He's a racing game YouTuber with a take like that. GT was and is a racing sim. Entirely different direction.
It's a racing game, you control vehicles. You'd be surprised at how many sim and arcade games use the same physics principles, sometimes even the same physics system.
Just a lack of them.
You haven't been through enough shovelware.
His criticism has value on gameplay, but has no clue about style and music.
That is agreeable.
Excellent video, I learned a lot today.
You'll have to unlearn, unfortunately. That's not even half the comments. I'm tired of roasting them now. Yes, that's possible. My own comment doesn't even show up in a fresh browser session. Yup, it got flagged.